The pilots of Lion Air 610 had less than 6 minutes to diagnose a system they had never been told existed. The nose kept pushing down. They pulled back. It pushed again. The flight operations manual sitting in the cockpit jump seat contained no entry for MCAS, the Maneuvering Characteristics Augmentation System. Not a paragraph, not a footnote. Because a single number on a certification checklist, entered months earlier in a Boeing engineering office in Seattle, had made that omission perfectly legal. This is Failpoint. Tonight's report, the Boeing 737 MAX. To understand what MCAS was, you need to understand what problem it was solving, and why Boeing was under pressure to solve it quietly. By 2011, Airbus was offering airlines the A320neo, a fuel-efficient jet with larger, repositioned engines. Boeing needed a competitive answer fast. Developing an entirely new aircraft would take a decade. Instead, Boeing chose to re-engine the existing 737 platform, a design whose bones dated to 1967. The result was the 737 MAX. But fitting larger engines onto an older fuselage created an aerodynamic problem Boeing's engineers could not simply ignore. The 737's original low-slung design left limited ground clearance. To fit the MAX's new CFM LEAP engines, significantly larger than their predecessors, Boeing's engineers moved them forward and higher on the wing. That shift changed the aircraft's aerodynamic behavior at high angles of attack. In certain conditions, the engine's thrust line could cause the nose to pitch upward uncommanded, potentially leading to an aerodynamic stall. The aircraft handled differently from the 737NG that thousands of pilots already flew. Boeing needed a software solution, one that could correct the handling without requiring pilots to retrain on a new aircraft type. That solution was MCAS. MCAS worked like this. A sensor on the aircraft's nose, an angle of attack vane, fed data into the flight control computer. If the sensor reported the nose pitching too steeply upward, MCAS would automatically trim the horizontal stabilizer downward, pushing the nose back toward level flight. Think of the stabilizer as a second, larger set of wings at the tail. MCAS could move it up to 2.5 degrees, later increased to the full authority of 10 degrees, in increments, with no upper limit on how many times it could activate. The system was designed to be subtle. It was designed to be seamless. It was designed, critically, to be invisible to the crew. Here is where the story turns on a single decision. Under FAA regulations, any flight-critical system must be classified by its failure hazard level. The scale has 5 tiers: no safety effect, minor, major, hazardous, and catastrophic. A catastrophic classification means a system failure could cause loss of the aircraft. That rating triggers mandatory requirements: redundant sensors, pilot training, simulator sessions, and, crucially, entries in the flight crew operating manual. Boeing's engineers initially classified MCAS failure as a major hazard, one level below catastrophic. That single classification legally eliminated every safeguard that might have made MCAS survivable. The FAA did not independently verify that classification. A 2005 regulatory agreement, the Organization Designation Authorization Program, had already delegated significant certification authority back to Boeing itself. Boeing engineers, employed by Boeing, reviewed Boeing's own safety analysis. The agency retained oversight in theory. In practice, the FAA's own Inspector General would later find that FAA engineers assigned to the MAX program lacked the technical expertise to challenge Boeing's assumptions. The system was not corrupt in the dramatic sense. It was something quieter and more dangerous, a bureaucratic structure that had normalized trusting the people with the most to lose from a negative answer. There were people inside Boeing who saw the risk. In 2016, a Boeing technical pilot named Mark Faulkner exchanged instant messages with a colleague about MCAS behaving erratically in the simulator, activating at low altitudes where the original specification said it would not. He wrote that it was, quote, running rampant. He noted it was egregious. Then, rather than escalating the finding through the safety system, Faulkner communicated with the FAA to walk back the activation envelope in the documentation, narrowing the described conditions on paper, not in the software. The aircraft flying those conditions would not know the difference. The pilots would not either because MCAS still wasn't in their manual. On October 29, 2018, Lion Air Flight 610 departed Jakarta's Soekarno-Hatta International Airport at 6:20 in the morning. The angle of attack sensor on the left side of the aircraft was faulty. It had been misread on 3 previous flights. MCAS received that false signal and began trimming the nose down. The crew pushed back. MCAS trimmed again. In 6 minutes and 13 seconds, across more than 24 MCAS activations, the crew fought a system they could not name against a procedure that didn't exist in any document they carried. The aircraft entered the Java Sea at approximately 450 knots. All 189 people aboard were killed. Boeing and the FAA issued a bulletin after Lion Air 610. It reminded pilots of an existing runaway stabilizer procedure, a checklist that predated MCAS entirely. It did not mention MCAS by name. It did not explain that a software system could cause repeated, automatic nose-down trim. Investigators would later describe the bulletin as insufficient. Ethiopian Airlines Flight 302 departed Addis Ababa on March 10, 2019, 4 months and 11 days after Lion Air 610. The crew had received the bulletin. They had read it. 6 minutes and 1 second after takeoff, with MCAS activating against them, Flight 302 impacted terrain at approximately 700 miles per hour. All 157 aboard died. The investigation that followed uncovered the classification decision's full weight. Because MCAS had been rated major rather than catastrophic, it was certified to operate on input from a single angle of attack sensor. A catastrophic rating would have required 2. Because it was rated major, no simulator training was mandated, and Boeing had actively worked to avoid that requirement, since simulator training would have cost airlines money and threatened the MAX's core commercial promise that pilots already certified on the 737NG could fly the MAX without additional type rating. The classification wasn't just an engineering judgment. It was a business decision wearing the language of safety. The 737 MAX was grounded globally on March 13, 2019. It remained grounded for 20 months, the longest grounding of a commercial aircraft in FAA history. Boeing eventually paid $2.5 billion in a settlement with the Department of Justice, admitting that 2 employees had deceived the FAA. MCAS was redesigned. It now requires agreement from both angle of attack sensors before it can activate, and its authority was reduced. Pilots received simulator training. The system was added to flight manuals. Every change made after the crashes was a change that the original hazard classification had made legally unnecessary. The engineering fixes existed. The regulatory category is what had made them optional. 346 people died because the system was classified 1 level below the threshold that would have demanded the safeguards that might have saved them. Not because engineers didn't understand the physics, not because pilots failed to react, because a number on a form, reviewed by the people who built the thing, accepted by an agency that had already ceded the authority to challenge it, made every corrective requirement disappear into a legal exemption. The mechanism of this failure wasn't a sensor. It was a process that had learned to trust itself. Every failure has a point. Find it before it finds you.